Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we get into tonight's second half, a couple links I'd like to share with you all. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below, my merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe, click the like button, and please leave a comment. It really does help and it does matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's second half. Shall we? So yesterday's conversation with James, or Dark Waters, really got me thinking about different theories on the lineage of Dogman. And then today, when I was on Sean Atwood's channel, Atwood Unleashed, which I was interviewed about the animal attacks that are happening and different things that I've been researching, I started thinking more about the possible Dogman lineage. And, well, this is something that I've shared before, but I'd like to share it again because this, to me, is probably one of the most realistic explanations for Bigfoot, wild man, dogman, werewolf, what have you. Every human culture has believed in the existence of other beings, monsters, humanoid, sapient, but inhuman. They have gone by different names: boogeyman, bugbear, cyclops, giant, Jotun, ogre, Ane, troll, yeti, Bigfoot, dogman, and more. But they are always feared lurkers in the shadows, threats to the clan, tribe, or hearth. Dungeons and Dragons did not create these monsters, and despite ongoing controversies, they do not represent anything modern. Humanity's legendary heroes have been fighting these monsters since time immemorial. The real question is why? Why does every civilization have similar myths? Why does every culture have legends of monstrous humanoids? And why are they always depicted as fearsome and dangerous? Well, because legends are real. That is at least the argument offered by Danny Van Drimeny in his book, Them and Us, How Neanderthal Predation Created Modern Human. Van Drimeny is a heterodox thinker, and his argument is well outside of mainstream view. So before we dive into the book, let's discuss the mainstream view. The mainstream view. Archaeologists and geneticists agree that humanity co-evolved and interbred with similar species. We nowadays have abundant, essentially irrefutable, archaeological and genetic evidence for the existence of multiple human-like species within the Paleolithic and Neolithic era. These include the Neanderthal, the Denisovan, the Hobbit, and several recently discovered and uncategorized species such as the Nesher Remla Homo in Israel. New human-like species are being discovered all of the time. Yet none of these archaic humans or humanoids survive today, not a single one. All have gone extinct, vanishing, save for traces of artifacts and bones in our wilderness and fragments of DNA in our genome. What happened to them all? Here disagreements begin. The possible causes of extinction, identified by scientists, include extinction from parasites and pathogens, extinction from interbreeding into humanity, extinction from inability to adapt to climate change, extinction from natural catastrophe, and extinction by war with humans. The latter view, which suggests that the human race brutally extinguished the other sapient primates it faced, was first proposed by French paleontologist Marceline Buell way back in 1912. It was then promptly ignored for many decades, as explained in the Archaeology of Warfare and Mass Violence in Ancient Europe. Archaeologists are increasingly aware that they underestimated the social impact of collective violence. Sites like Riedmont Kessel, Monte Bernorio, and Calcrease confront us with a poignant way with cruelties of war and mass violence in late prehistoric and early historic time. There is growing critique that archaeology has marginalized violence and presented too pacified a view of the past. Actually, it wasn't just archaeology that was biased. Academics of all sorts hate violence, and for decades they systematically marginalized it from their explanations of events. Only within the last 20 years has mainstream academics and scientists accepted the ubiquity of violence in man and their closest kin. Anthropologists systematically underestimated the violence of indigenous people, perpetuating the myth of the noble savage. Now they have admitted the level of violence in prehistoric times and non-state societies was much higher than today. Biologists believed that chimpanzees were only violent because of interactions with humans. Now they have confirmed that violence is innate to chimpanzees, who routinely engage in war and murder. Historians argued that Indo-European language, culture, bloodlines spread through migration and trade. Now they have acknowledged it was through large-scale violent conquest. With these developments in mind, mainstream academics have finally begun to accept that human beings drove Neanderthal to extinction through war. Nicholas R. Longrich, a senior lecturer in evolutionary biology and paleontology at the University of Bath, presents an excellent summary of the current consensus. To war is human, and Neanderthals were very like us. We are remarkably similar in our skull and skeletal anatomy and share 99.7% of our DNA. Behaviorally, Neanderthals were astonishingly like us. The archaeological record confirms Neanderthals' lives were anything but peaceful. The best evidence that Neanderthals not only fought but excelled at war is that they met us and were not immediately overrun. Instead, for around 100,000 years, Neanderthals resisted modern human expansion. For thousands of years, we must have tested their fighters, and for thousands of years, we kept losing. Finally, the stalemate broke, and the tide shifted. We don't know why. It's possible the invention of superior ranged weapons, bows, spear throwers, throwing clubs, let lightly built Homo sapiens harassed the stocky Neanderthal from a distance, using hit-and-run tactics, or perhaps better hunting and gathering techniques let sapiens feed bigger tribes, creating numerical superiority in battle. Ultimately, we won, but this wasn't because they were less inclined to fight. In the end, we likely just became better at war than they were. The mainstream view then is Neanderthals were behaviorally and physically much like humans, made war much like humans, and were eventually defeated by superior technology and numbers, much as Europeans defeated indigenous peoples throughout history by superior technology and numbers. In other words, we killed off Fred Flintstone. The heterodox view. Let us now consider Danny Van Drimeny's view. Van Drimeny agrees with the mainstream that Neanderthals were driven to eventual extinction by war with Homo sapiens. Where he parts ways with mainstream is in his assessment of what Neanderthals were like. Van Drimeny shows that Neanderthals were apex predators. Analysis of isotopes in the Bone College has shown that Neanderthals' diet was 97% meat. They've estimated to have eaten 4.1 pounds of fresh meat a day. Ample evidence exists to show they used stone-tipped spears to hunt. From the bones littered their caves, we know they hunted woolly mammoth, giant cave bear, woolly rhino, bison, wolves, and even cave lion, the most dangerous and lethal animals on Earth. Neanderthals were cannibals. A number of Neanderthal sites reveal bones that had been cut and cracked open to extract marrow. While this hypothesis was initially rejected, a recent found at El Cedron in Spain revealed numerous Neanderthal skeletons with the unmistakable marks of butchery by cannibals wielding hand axe, knives, and scrapers. Neanderthals had more robust bones and heavy musculature than human Homo sapiens. They weighed 25% more. They were so heavily muscled that their skeletons had to develop extra thick bone. One of the most characteristic features of Neanderthal is the exaggerated massiveness of their trunk and limb bones. All have been preserved bones suggest a strength seldom attained by modern human. Quoting paleoanthropologist Eric Trinkaus, a healthy Neanderthal male could lift an average NFL linebacker over his head and throw him through the goalposts. Neanderthals also evolved extremely thick skull, post-cranial hyperrobustity that protected them in close quarter confrontation with prey. They all had kyphosis with hunched backs that gave them a distinct profile and gait. Neanderthals' teeth were twice as large as human. According to a 2008 anthropologist research, their mouths could open much wider than a human's, enabling them to take extremely large bites. Judging by the size of the jaw, they had tremendous bite force. Neanderthals evolved in Ice Age Europe and had specific adaptations to the climate. They had short limbs, large noses, compact torsos. Most importantly, they were covered with thick fur. Since no Neanderthal cadaver survives, this point cannot be proven or disproved. But Van Drimini points out that every primate except Homo sapien is covered in fur, and that every cold-adapted mammal during the Ice Age had thick fur, including mammals that were hairless in Africa. Such as the elephant and rhinoceros, there is no reason to believe Neanderthals were hairless except for our desire to have them look like us. The only way Neanderthals could have survived in the Ice Age without fur was if they made a thick protective cloth. Archaeologist Mark White points out, Neanderthal clothing would have needed to be more than ragged loincloths of popular depiction. Some form of tailoring would have been required, but Neanderthal sites have yielded no evidence of needlecraft technology. They were not making clothes because they had fur. Neanderthal skulls had extremely large eye sockets, suggesting very large eyes. That in turn suggests the Neanderthal was nocturnal. However, the large eyes pose a problem, as Ice Age Europe would have presented Neanderthal with blinding sunlight reflected off the snow. Van Drimini suggests that the Neanderthals had vertically aligned slit pupils, which enabled them to use the full diameter of the lens in low light, while shutting out bright light by day. Nocturnal primates, such as the rhesus monkey and owl monkey, all have large eyes with vertically aligned slit pupils. Van Drimini suggests Neanderthals also had a tapetum lactatum, like a cat, that made their eyes shine in the dark, and had a dark sclera, like all other primates. Neanderthals had distinct facial prognathism that featured large, broad noses. Van Drimini argues that this suggests a Neanderthal snout with a dog-like nose designed for scent and hunting. This was useful during nocturnal raids. Neanderthals did not speak human language. He quotes a September 2008 talk presented to the American Association of Physical Anthropologists. Their large nasal cavity would have decreased the intelligibility of vowel-like sounds, and the combination of a long face, short neck, unequally proportioned vocal tract, large nose made it highly unlikely that Neanderthals would have been unable to produce quantal speech. Neanderthal tongues were also not shaped to speak clearly. Overall, the evidence suggests a creature that spoke with a deep timbre and made lots of guttural grunts. The Neanderthal that Van Drimini describes is thus a terrifying creature, a hunched cannibalistic predator with large shiny eyes and animalistic snout, covered by thick fur and massive muscles built for close combat hunting by night, with a brutish and guttural voice, and a large mouth with huge teeth and powerful jaws. This does not remind me of Fred Flintstone. That, my friends, is a dogman, a bugbear, an ogre, a whatever. Whatever it is has been appearing in our myths and legends for thousands of years. It is the great enemy. According to them and us, Neanderthal and human were predator and prey, and we were the prey. Neanderthals came upon helpless humans by night, slew our men and carried off, and had their way with our women. After all, how do we think that Neanderthal DNA got into our genome? And they kept doing it generation after generation. Not only were they stronger, faster, and tougher than Homo sapien, the Neanderthal were just as smart and just as well armed. Under assault by these flesh-eating monsters, the human race almost went extinct. Only by becoming an apex predator ourselves did we survive. We became the greatest killers the world has ever seen, because if we hadn't, we would have died out. Is Van Drimini's theory correct? He cites a number of anomalies in the genetic makeup and fossil record of human beings as evidence. Let's start with genetic makeup. The most remarkable thing about the human genome is that it's not very diverse. According to geneticist Pascal Gagnou, humans have by far the least amount of genetic variations of any primate. We actually found that one single group of 55 chimpanzees in West Africa has twice the genetic variability of all human, he reports. Another scientist, Bernard Wood, says the amount of genetic variation that has accumulated in humans is just nowhere compatible with the age of our species. To explain it, we must have come within a cigarette paper's thickness of becoming extinct, he says. Dr. David Reich of Harvard Medical calculated that the population of humans dropped to at least 50 individuals. Something terrible happened to the human race. When did this population bottleneck occur? The number of teams have analyzed mutation rates to find out. The mutation rate in our Y chromosome suggests the bottleneck occurred 37 to 49,000 years ago. The mutation rate in single nucleotide polymorphism suggests 48,000 years ago. Dr. Reich's study claims 27 to 53,000. Now let's turn to fossil, specifically the collection known as the Qafzi skull fossil found in present-day Israel. The Qafzi skull represents among the earliest known populations of Homo sapiens. The fossils first appeared in the Levant region around 125,000 years ago, after tens of thousands of years occupied by Levant. They begin to disappear from fossil records at around 80,000 for the next 30,000 years, that is, from 80,000 to 50,000. Years ago, the fossils in the Levantine region are mostly Neanderthal. After that, the Neanderthal fossils begin to disappear from the Levant, and Homo sapien fossils began to appear. The apparent timeline of Neanderthal invasion matches the apparent timeline of our genetic bottleneck. Neanderthals invaded the Levant around 80,000 years ago and proceeded to drive the human race to the brink of doom. The Neanderthal is gone now, but we endure. While we live, he does as well, for we carry fragments of his DNA and perhaps we carry the memory of our species' great foe in our myths, our legends, or Jungian collective unconscious, as Van Drimini writes. If early Greek, Roman, Norse, and Chinese mythologies are anything to go by, the legends spun by early humans center around a heroic human, almost always a man, who is pitted against ugly, evil, cruel monster with superhuman strength. This universal mythical monster is usually male, irreverently wild, hairy, dangerous, and unclothed. Often it is half man, half animal, and tends to live in the dark forest or dark caves, or emerge from the underworld, uncover of darkness. And the monster is frequently a fiend who kidnaps and ravishes innocent maidens, fair princess, whom he drags back to his shadowy lair, commonly feeds on human flesh, devours children, and stalks by night. To me, this one statement states that Dogman and possibly Bigfoot are related to Neanderthal. The Neanderthal that Van Drimini describes is thus a terrifying creature, a hunched cannibalistic predator with large shining eyes and an animalistic snout, covered by thick fur and massive muscles, built for close combat, hunting by night, with a brutish and guttural voice and a huge mouth with huge teeth and powerful jaws. It did not look like Fred Flintstone. Is Dogman and Bigfoot related to Neanderthal? This one statement, this one scientific statement, proves that they are possibly. The Neanderthal that Van Drimini describes is thus a terrifying creature, a hunched cannibalistic predator with large shining eyes and an animalistic snout covered in thick fur, and massive muscles built for close combat, hunting by night, with a brutish and guttural voice and a large mouth, with huge teeth and powerful jaws. It did not look like Fred Flintstone. Just some things to think about. I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I am thoroughly exhausted, and I am going to just go to bed early tonight and get some rest. I definitely need it. Stay well, everyone.